Hello, namaste. My name is Susanne and welcome to Susanne Talks To. Today I'm going to talk to Dinesh Nair, Wing Commander, retired Air Force officer, 3 decades of aviation experience. And just before we are going to dive into this, I have a little disclaimer. If there's any problem with YouTube, with the internet, with either of the phones, we're going to shut this chat and open immediately a new one. So just in case we disappear, you can find us somewhere else. Welcome. I'm so happy to have this chat with you, Dinesh.
Thank you, Susanne, and it's my pleasure too to be on your show. And I'm looking forward to a very interesting discussion, and of course, a lot to share.
Yeah, a lot to share. And the way we got together was also very interesting because our neighbors, Smitha and Vipul, they are friends of yours or friends. They became friends with you. And they told me about your project. And I got so excited about it. I said, I want Dinesh on my show. I would love to talk about this. And we are going to dive right in because you have an amazing project, a second career. And I would love for you to introduce it yourself.
Yeah, so let me begin with the connection that you just said. So our neighbors, they were being visited by Vipul, and I found that he showed some interest in aviation. So he didn't come to me for flight anxiety. So I said, let me do a session for them, and that's what they caught on to and told you. Of course, when I was discussing my what I conduct as a program, they were there in the simulator. So they got a concept of how the flight anxiety is removed, and I think that is what made them get interested. And I guess that's how they spoke to you. So let me begin by giving you a short background about myself. I'm essentially an aeronautical engineer. I did my engineering from Calcutta University, called Jadavpur University, for those who know that part of the country. Uh, After engineering, I joined the IAF as a pilot officer. That's the first rank as a commissioned officer that you can join. And I was specialized into the MiG-21 fighter jets and the Mirage 2000 fighter jets. Uh, I'm essentially a fighter jet man. But over the years in the service, like the Air Force does, it exposes you to many other fields, almost every vertical of aviation. And I was as much lucky. Of course, you have to be lucky to be working on many of the fields that the military aviation offers. So I was one of them who was very lucky to have worked in almost every other vertical of aviation. And why I make this mention is because that became very handy for me when I was choosing my second career. We are going to talk about that. Uh, we are essentially a aviation family. That's because my wife is also a Air Force officer, and
Wow.
she flew the Antonov's 32 transport planes for the Air Force for 15 years. And one thing that we are luckier than most people in the Air Forces for years is that we had the experience of participating in the Kargil War in 1999, both she and me. One by virtue of being posted in that area where this the problem was happening, that is in the northern sector, and secondly by virtue of the aircrafts that we were working on. Uh, so let me sum up my 23 years with the Air Force by saying that huge amount of experience and lot of experience up my sleeves. I left as a wing commander, and as I said, all these past experience of military aviation, uh, be it in the area of military aeroplanes or the aerodrome operations or planning or strategic planning or war planning, name it, all these exposures we got. And that's precisely what I use to fuel my passion and my second career as what I call a flight anxiety consultant. So what I essentially do is I help passengers in civil aviation get over their flight anxiety. We'll get to discuss that a little later. But continuing with the introduction, uh, so let me give you a little figure about a few facts about flight statistics. So we are essentially 5 billion passengers who fly in a year, and compare that to the
5
total
billion where? Worldwide?
worldwide. Yes.
Worldwide.
So
Wow.
whatever I'm talking is worldwide, but these figures really will open up your eyes or the eyes of any passenger, because we normally don't put facts to figures. Okay. So we are 5 billion passengers. Of course, 5 billion, when I say 5, we call it, technically the word is emplanement. That means 5 billion people boarded the planes. So of course you would have done 10 flights or 100 flights in a year, but that's the type of number of people who
So I
board
count
the.
every time. I count every time as a new one. If I do 10
Yes.
flights,
So
okay.
yes. So why this figure is important? This is to tell you that the entire world population churns on a flight every 1 year. Okay, we are presently. I was just seeing the worldometer figures. It says we are 8 billion now. So maybe the aviation statistics also would have gone up to 6 billion. Discount the small time of pandemic that we had. Actually, the entire aviation statistics have gone topsy turvy because of the because of the pandemic. But on a rough estimate, we are about 5 billion passengers who travel over about 40-50 million flights. And do you know that we have only about 300 or maybe 400 deaths in a year maximum because of civil aviation? So we are talking about a safest mode of transportation. And yet, I have a business that people have flight anxiety. So obviously, the first question that you would ask me is,
Yeah,
if
I
the
would.
aviation is the safest mode, why would there be flight anxiety? Well, the answer is very simple. You have to delve into human psychology, and the answer is that we all are made, or rather, we are built, and we have evolved to walk and run on the land. We are not made to go anywhere undersea or in the air. So obviously, flight anxiety is a very natural thing to happen. So this is the first thing that I make, first statement I make to any of my clients who come, that you are not abnormal, you are normal. Okay. Of course,
That
the
calms
others
them
who don't.
probably down. That probably calms them down because I think if somebody has anxiety and then comes to you, I think it is like a big step for them. And they will bring that
Yes.
anxiety into the room and into the conversation with you, right?
Yes. So anything that I say is essentially to calm them down, and not to calm them down on a flimsy count, to calm them down with very factual things, like, this is a gentleman who thinks he's the only one in the world who's suffering flight anxiety. And then when he comes there, he understands, okay, he's just one of them who's suffering, and I'm coming down to those figures also. So so uh, that is what brings me makes this a tangible proposal of helping people fighting flight anxiety. So when it comes to the prevalence, so obviously the next question comes, how prevalent is flight
Yeah,
anxiety?
how
So
many? Yeah.
let me quote from the figures of ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, which is the United Nations aviation arm. ICAO says that flight anxiety, the prevalence is anything between 25 to 40%. I mean to say 4 out of 10 passengers. So put it in perspective, if you are flying from here to Delhi, in all probability, you are flying a Boeing 737 or a Airbus 320, which takes about 180 passengers. 70 passengers on board your flight are flight anxious.
Wow. But
Yeah.
that's Dinesh, that's a huge number of people because if I fly and I look around, I don't see people displaying any anxiety.
So
Are they masking it that well?
yeah, so I'll now. So that's all about learning how to spot them, and I'm
Oh,
going to talk about how to. I'm going to
I don't
talk
know if
about
I
how to
want to
spot
know
them.
that. I don't know if I want to know how to spot them because
No,
then what
that
do I
that
do?
itself becomes a very interesting activity on flight, when everyone is getting bored, and you don't have to really work hard to spot them. I'm going to tell you, it's going to occur to you automatically when we're talking
Okay.
about, when you are going to talk about that. So
Okay.
when I come to that, before that, let me tell you what is the perspective of people. You may have some people live on the chat, or maybe who watch that later on. But
Hmm.
I have a set pattern of expressions that I get with people when I talk about flight anxiety. So I thought I must describe that because that makes the subject very interesting. So when obviously when I meet people whom I have known before and they ask me, okay, what are you doing now, Dinesh, these days? I tell them post Air Force, I do a flight anxiety removal program. And so when I'm going to talk set by set. So when I'm speaking to happy flyers, their question is, but are there flight anxious passengers?
Oh,
I say, okay.
really?
Now, when I'm speaking to the business minded people, most people are nowadays because everyone sees business, whether it's tangible or not. They say, are there sufficient number of people who have flight anxiety? Which is the same as the first question the other gentleman had asked. And then I have these flight anxious passengers who ask me, you mean to say there are more like me who have flight
Oh,
anxiety? You see how different
yeah.
perspectives are. And finally, a pilot. Trust me, I speak to 9 out of 10 pilots whom I speak to. They tell me, are you trying to tell me, Dinesh, that on board the flight that I fly, there are flight anxious passengers? That's the amount of that's the type of understanding people have. Yes.
I
So
think I think that looks like you are what do you call that? You're fingering a V stack, like either you are like the if a pilot doesn't, how come they don't assume that automatically, that you have at least one person on board that has a flight anxiety? I mean,
yeah, that's because of many reasons. One is we are not looking for it. Only when you start looking for it, you realize that. And second thing is you are not sensitized to it. The main reason is you're not sensitized. So that's how these programs that we do or sessions that we do, the one like with you, this mainly is more of a awareness program than actually fighting flight anxiety for people. And this has a huge impact in the way we deal with aviation presently. So going forward, you'll find that much of the problems will be resolved if people, pilots, and the flight attendants knew how prevalent the flight anxiety issue is. And I'm going to cover that as one of the points that, if I remember, maybe I'll make that statement very quickly, very soon, so that I don't forget it. Okay, but coming to is this figure increasing or decreasing? This figure is steadily increasing because of the negative impact of media. This figure of 40 or 25% that I spoke about. And more than that, try to relate it now to when you fly, the formal environment at the airport and in the aeroplanes. If you've flown 20, 30 years back, aeroplane was more like a party hall. I mean, people talking, chatting, flight attendant coming, taking your kid to the cockpit, serving some extra juice.
it is
And
different.
all that has changed. So in any formal environment, the it's natural to generate some sort of anxious moments for the passengers. Now, there are pilots when they ask me, so I tell them, "Why are you asking me? Let me tell you two things, and you Google that, and you will figure out." One is the ICAO is, as I said, is a United Nations arm of aviation. They conducted in 2006 a world conference on fear of flying.
World conference.
2000
Wow.
world conference. Now, ICAO is the custodian of aviation safety. When they do something, they do it with a reason. But it intrigues me actually to figure out why they are not doing it on a regular basis subsequently. That's a big question I am myself researching because I think there's something political about it, or maybe if you start doing research and I don't know what the airline and aviation relationship is. That's a subject for separate subject, and I'm still trying to figure out an answer. They did in 2006 or so,
That's a
and
long
they never
time
did it after
ago,
that.
if you think about it. Because just 1 second now, we used to just go into an airport. Now you have to go and have a buddy check, and they go through your luggage, and you are going through all these beep beep and everything. What was not there before. And then when you go before the plane again, everybody checks you. Then on top of it, COVID happened, so everybody was going with a mask. So do you think that some increase in that anxiety has also come from COVID? Because that was one more level of tension being on a plane, maybe you are catching something.
Yes. So COVID did not create that much of anxiety on board a flight as
Oh,
much as the mask did. So you'll be surprised. Why would a mask? These airlines are supposed to report unruly or unrelenting passengers, or they call it disruptive passengers also. So during the COVID, there are a lot of people who were unwilling to comply to these mask instructions.
mm,
So that if you ask me, it is less to do with, obviously everyone was worried about their health, but it is more to do with being commanded by somebody to do something for which you don't yourself find a satisfactory reason. So
okay.
I will come to that as to why people have anxieties on board a flight. So when we come to that, one of the things is being in control and not being in control. So we're
Hmm.
going to talk about that. So in fact, that is the reason. And who are those people who get this flight anxiety? Are they common people, or are they the jet setters? We'll talk about it in a moment. So one more information I thought would be relevant to say is that abroad, when I'm talking abroad, I mean the Western countries,
Mhm.
uh, the airlines conduct flight anxiety courses. Like the British Airways is one airline which conducts, as a vertical of British Airways, it conducts what is known as a flying with confidence courses. So anyone who's thinking that if this is a very formalized business or a work, yes, even an airline like British Airways, it's worthwhile going into their website and seeing what they do. And of course, there are people like me, very few handful of them, who conduct these courses worldwide other than the airlines. And I'm glad to say that in India I'm the only one, at least the only one that I know of. And in
One.
Southeast Asia and this area also, probably I'm the only one. So uh, that gives that with that maybe a long introduction, but maybe we can pick up from there.
Yeah, but if it's such a prevalent problem and you're saying so many people are affected, why is not more done? If you're saying you're the only one who's doing it, maybe even only in Southeast Asia, and I mean, shouldn't more people pick this up or airlines pick it up? And you said the last conference on this world conference was in 2006 only. We are in 2023.
Correct. So airlines usually prioritize their tasks, and this somehow they don't see as a important aspect. That reason being, if you ask me, is that they are commercially oriented. Okay, so they don't want to sidestep to these small things like looking after, and all said and done. Uh, uh, Passenger safety or safety through passengers is a lesser understood concept. Like I can tell you, the entire gamut of safety is associated with pilots, pilot training, pilot orientation, airport operators, aeroplane maintenance, but nobody is thinking of the passengers as a weakest link in the safety chain on board a plane. But you ask me the fact is that once you are 300 souls on board, two pilots and maybe four flight attendants and about 192 passengers,
Yeah.
you all are equal contributor to the safety of the plane. And that's the very reason why we have this concept of unruly passenger, because an
Mm.
unruly passenger is actually a passenger who can bring down a plane.
Yeah.
So, but this concept of a passenger also being a very important link in the safety chain of aviation is lesser understood. And obviously, when you prioritize, the airlines have their own other problems that they are sorting. So more and more, more and more individuals, I think, will come into this business. But there is a problem. Individuals have, like, you remember I just mentioned that I was lucky to have gone through many verticals of while in the Air Force. So
Yeah.
aviation flight anxiety counseling requires you to be a pit stop for all sort of people who work in aviation. That means you must be at the same time, you must be able to answer questions on piloting, about engineering, about why loading is done in a particular way, why the flight attendants ask you to sit down, why are the shutters to be put, and why did the gate agent misbehave? Why was the gate agent not giving you a certain information? And so the entire gamut of aviation you have to answer one person. And it is the most difficult thing to find one person who can answer all the queries at the same time. And I'm lucky that I trained myself and I had that exposure to be, because whenever a person comes to you, you are his contact point. The first thing that he looks at you is whether he can trust you or not.
Yeah.
So only if he trusts you that he's going to be receptive. So trust sorts out 50% of the problem. When I say this, I mean you are suffering an illness. You go to a doctor. Doesn't 50% of your problem go just by having met the doctor? And
sometimes even more. Sometimes even more. I think it is very important how much trust you have in that person. And you said you have a very specialized knowledge where you can answer everybody. Have you ever thought, if you want to, if you have more inquiries than you can handle, did you ever think that you can maybe outsource it and train people? Because you know all of this. You can write a whole, like a book. You can give courses to people so they can teach other people not to be scared on flights.
Okay, so how I put it is that if you want 100% resolution to the problem, if you're not taking it as a business but more as a passion and as a very noble jobs, then you require somebody who can deliver exactly 100%. In fact, more than 100%, because the uptake of a person who has got flight anxiety is usually much less. When he comes to you with 100 questions, so typically how this program works, let me explain to you that there are people who have flight anxiety and they are always on the web looking for information. Typically, are the aeroplanes safe? And every time they look up something, they get the answer: no, aeroplanes are, what you read is just the tip of the iceberg. Aeroplanes are very, very unsafe. Because the reason is, all the news that they're looking for is about accidents, about what people did not do and what went wrong, and all these are, at one point in time, they were scoops for the media people. Yeah. The whole aim was for it to survive only those 2 or 3 days. Aeroplane crashes, 230 almost died. Okay, almost. Maybe almost died. And aeroplane 230 lives almost saved, whereas it is a very routine thing that the pilot may have done to bring the aircraft down. He may have had an engine problem. So the whole idea of this news is to stay in the media for 3 days and then die down. But unfortunately, in the internet world, this remains on the top of the Google search, because these guys are searching for it. So what happens is, these guys get a perception that aeroplanes are very unsafe, very different perspective from what most other people have. And then they obviously look for solutions. They're looking for is there anybody who's helping people to fight flight anxiety? And that is where they land up with my setup, like Cockpit Vista. Okay. So once they call you up, they begin a new journey. Which is actually their last resort. As per them also, it's the last resort to getting on board a flight, because otherwise they've given up on flights. Yes. So
okay, like completely, even not trying, not taking a Valium and going on board. They have given up. Most of them.
Most people have given up. They stopped flying. So I'll probably cover some of these anxieties that they talk about, and they're very unique. In each one is a very unique one. So they call me up and speak. So over the call, I create an environment where they can open up to me. So that's the first level of trust. So they tell me, so you need to give them a solution, whether it's possible, not possible. So I judge their type of problem, and then there are combinations of solutions that are there, and then they come to me with an appointment, and that is when we go into the simulator and do a full session. So what we essentially do.
What is a simulator for the audience who doesn't know? You have to explain this a little bit. What is a simulator, and where did you put it? You're living in Bangalore, and what is it in your backyard? or what? How do I imagine that? What does it look like?
So till a simulator is a full aeroplane with passenger seats, cabin, and the cockpit, and it is an open cockpit in the sense that you remember about 40, 50 years back, the cockpit and the cabin didn't have doors. Okay, they didn't have many years
Wow.
back. Yes, yes. So because and some of them had just curtains. In fact, they so that's how aviation, how informal aviation used to be then. So that's got an impact on the way people nowadays behave. Uh, so what I essentially do is that when they come there, I know some templated questions that they will have, which has been creating the anxiety to them. So I cover that as a, a fact building session. And what we essentially do is expose them to all those queries that they had, and everything that he had as a query, answer that, make him believe that what he knew was not true, and then show him by doing that activity, and because seeing is believing, and take a step further by letting him handle that situation and he himself. So there are my guests who come who are so scared of aeroplanes. They come and then they fly the aeroplane and they say, oh, if I could do it, a pilot is definitely going to do it in a much better way. So this sort of a training is known as exposure therapy, we call it.
Okay. Okay, I heard about exposures therapy, but not in with flight anxiety. I have a question. Is there a stereotype, a certain kind of person who comes to you and has flight anxiety? Is that a certain human type that gets this kind of anxiety, or is this more like it can happen to like
Okay,
anybody? Or how
so
come?
so I would answer this with in a different format. What is the profile of the people who come to you?
Yeah.
Okay, so the answer is they are A, the jet setters and the frequent flyers.
Oh,
B, yeah, B, the people who were very happy flyers all their life and suddenly became flight anxious.
okay.
Yeah, and then you have people who have medical issues, like there are certain clinical problems that get you flight anxious. Like I'll give you an example: thyroidism. It is to do with your hormone levels.
Yes.
So, and hormone levels have lots to do with your moods. So,
Oh.
and anxiety is all about partly about the mood, right? So
Hmm.
that also spills over to anxiety, to flight anxiety.
Oh, okay.
Then, then,
So that
then
would
you
be
have
like what I sometimes have when I have too much gas in my tummy before a flight because
possible.
it's an early flight. I didn't sleep well. I couldn't have my breakfast as usual. I couldn't do certain things. And I reached the airport and my tummy is going gur. And I feel like it is like anxiety, but maybe it's just a
Yes,
physical
but
problem.
that I would call as a one event only, because that is for a particular flight. But these
Okay.
are people who have it on a very regular basis, very very regular basis. So clinical is one of them,
Okay.
clinical or medical reason you may call it.
Okay.
And then there are good happy passengers who get flight anxious because of traumatic event, and typically that traumatic event is a turbulence.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Me.
So
Me.
turbulence
That
is
that
one
fits
thing
me.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
No, just wanted to say that fits me because I was always a very happy and normal flyer, and but I had a pretty bumpy flight one time coming from Kolkata in monsoon time back to Mumbai, and I was never shaken so much. I was like you couldn't really sit in your seat, and this kind of situation, I felt physically sick as well, and that made me a little anxious. That now I'm okay again, but all the flights I took afterwards, I sat a little bit like okay, and the moment there was a little bump, I was like no, not again, not again, not again. So that, that is my experience with it. So I can
Yeah. So
understand if somebody is having a traumatic experience, then they end up having to come to you.
Yes, so traumatic experience not addressed is the basic reason. So when you have a traumatic experience, like typically a turbulence, that is one of the most common causes. So that is when you start reading up about these things, and more you read, more you get deeper and deeper into it. You are, for some bad reason, you are exposed only to the negative information, and you get into a negative loop, and that is when a person decides that all this while I thought planes are safe, but they are not, and then they stop flying. And so in medical terminology, they say every they then call it a PTSD, right? Post traumatic stress disorder, which which in medical terms you will go to a doctor and get treated, a psychiatrist or to a medical specialist. And but PTSD, if you hold on to for very long, that also creates a flight anxiety. So another class of people who get flight anxious are these sort of people. And yet another class of people is the those who read a lot. Now that's where I said, if you ask me who are those who come to you, they are the rich, affluent, and the educated. I put it in 3 words all the time. So the rich, the affluent, for very simple reason that the rich people have the fear of death. They say, oh, what if something happens on the flight? What happens to my family? And who takes over my business? So those sort of issues they have, and they get flight anxious very quickly, very very quickly. Let me tell you. And
Wow.
in fact, to those who ask this question, I tell them, if you may try to make a list of the rich and the famous people who have flight anxiety, you keep making using up paper, and you'd still not finish the list. It's that big. Okay. But of course, they don't speak much about it. They don't come out. And then typically another set of people who are, like you mentioned in the beginning, or rather we spoke, was those who are used to being in control, who in their organization run the organization. They decide when they will sit for a meeting, they decide when they'll close the meeting, they decide who all will sit for the meeting. And then you come on a flight, and there's a young girl who tells you when to sit, how to sit, how long to sit, and how to wear a belt, and how not to go to the loo when told. So that creates, for a lot of people, that is being out of control. Of course, that was on the lighter side, I said. But on a serious note, their control is about something else. The pilot who's flying the aeroplane, they cannot control him, whereas they are always used to controlling the people whom they like, their subordinates. So that creates a sort of an anxiety, or subsequently a mistrust, because anxiety and mistrust both are interconnected, and essentially the anxiety comes out of mistrust only. So you feel that someone is not doing his job, or not doing it the way you thought it should be, whereas you could always be wrong. So they are the ones who get. Then I can make a statement. I can only justify by the numbers who come to me. Flight anxiety is seen more in women. And when I read up on the psychology of anxiety, I come to know that anxiety is also more with women. So I've asked myself, what could be the reason? I think the answer is that they take a lot of responsibility. They have their hands into a lot of things, like family, grooming, children. They have their hormone issues. In fact, we're talking about the hormone issues. The hormone issue in women work negatively for stress busting, whereas in the men, the testosterone, basically they work positive. So I don't know how we have built the two sexes, but that's how it works for. So there could be many more reasons, but generally, the research has shown that more women have flight anxiety, and
also the control relevance. Just Dinesh. Also the ones who are having a control issue, they're also more women.
Somehow the people who come to me, the women are from the 25 to 35 years bracket, mostly IT people. So I have not had that experience. Maybe because they have not come to me, but I have had a lot of women coming. Out of the total clients that I've had, more about 80%, I would say, are women. And
maybe women feel also more like they're more open to looking for help. I think a woman is more ready to go and open up to somebody else and say, I have a problem, help me.
you said it. You said it. In fact, I thought I would make this point. So you caught on to the right this thing. So that's how it works. Yes, it works like that. And then so that's one. And then flight anxiety passengers usually don't reach out for help. So uh, that is probably why we don't have too many statistics, especially in India. But abroad, yes, abroad, one good thing is that these people, the anyone who sees anxiety as a part of their depression or something affecting their life, and they head for the counselor and doctors and psychologists, and they take help. But uh, over a period of time, probably I'll be able to tell you that the statistics are more or less constant worldwide. So it has got nothing to do with the demographics of the place or of a country or the education level. By and large, the statistics is what I just now said, who all have flight anxiety. So the question that we started with, the profile of the people who have flight anxiety.
Yeah. And can it be prevented? If somebody is like, is there any way that you cannot get flight anxiety?
Absolutely. You in fact asked a very relevant question. In psychology, it is said, uh, if you have ever been in a cockpit of an aeroplane and you have been there for long enough to understand the cockpit, how pilots work, whatever may happen to the aeroplane subsequently in your lifetime, you will never get flight anxious. So, uh, a cockpit visit to with a domain expert. Obviously, the domain expert is a pilot. Uh, for specific phases of the flight, if you can be there, you will probably never get flight anxiety. So that answers the very starting question that we came from, where we came from, that today the doors are closed, you do not have an access to the cockpit, you cannot talk too much about aviation to any aviation people in the airport. They suspect you as something, you are going to
Oh,
do something. So all these things put together are only increasing the numbers of flight anxiety passengers. If the world were to open up the cockpits for the people, I'm sure that you would not have a case of flight anxiety. Now you look back, uh, in the 70s, 80s, people never ever had anything called flight anxiety. In fact, because they would speak to the captain, they would be able to speak to the flight attendant, would take them to the cockpit. The captain, when he tells them that
yeah,
flight is very safe,
yeah. I mean,
oh,
even in the 90s, it was there. I told you this story about my dad, who had for the first flight, he had to fly to South Korea to visit me, and it was an 11, 12-hour flight or something like this, and this was in the 90s. And it was Swiss Air, I think. And when they went on board, my mom said he needs a little pampering because this is his first flight and he's anxious about it and he's a little nervous. So later on, the pilot came, got my dad from his seat, from economy class, from totally normal, brought him to the cockpit, showed him everything. And since then, my dad is like, okay, no problem.
yes.
But we can't do this with everybody.
No,
Yeah,
so
nowadays you can do this.
correct. So actually, the scientific reasoning is that when you hear a statement from the authority, and in
Yeah.
the case of an aeroplane or aviation, it's a pilot or a domain expert, something like what I do, that calms you down. I say 50% and you said 80%. So that's the type of figure. Rest, what is left is only tits bits. Then what you left with only small questions here and there, that's it. But this works a lot, hearing it from. So that's the example of the doctor that I was trying to give you. You go to a doctor, the doctor says you're fine and you get fine. I mean,
Yeah.
so so that's how it works.
But
Yes.
we can't put, not everybody can come to you. Not everybody can, like, visiting a cockpit is not possible anymore. Um, I don't see any other. And how do you? Is there any other solution? If would it help if people would see a YouTube video of a cockpit, a pilot doing his job? Would it calm people down? Would they feel like more at ease then?
Yes, it would. It would. See, you need to find out alternatives. So if you can't go to a cockpit, obviously you can visit something. So I also conduct something called preventive flight anxiety preventive program. Exactly what we discussed. So people who come who get explained the how the flight works, we do a flight together, and so the experience is the same as being on a flight, and it works. But yes, not everyone can come and attend these programs because either there's a geographical limitation or there is a monetary limitation, whatever it be.
Mhm.
So and more than that, I think it's not even monetary. It's something to do with the mindset. We don't approach for a solution unless we have the problem growing bigger
A
than
lot of
larger
pressure
than
on
life.
you. Only when you're the pressure cooker is gonna explode
Yes.
any second, then people usually go and try to find some help outside.
Yes. So in fact, that I can tell you that most people come to me. They watch they've been keeping a tab on the website for quite some time. They've spoken to me maybe once or twice, but they come usually when they have a flight. So just before the flight, because that's when the pressure cooker example that you gave me. So,
Okay.
but yes, the other alternate is YouTube. But again, watching YouTube from reputed people, so that definitely calms down the anxiety level.
You have a grading of the severity of the anxiety. Is there like a number, like a 1 to 10? Somebody who's like on the 10 scale, and you will treat that person differently than somebody who's just like a mild 2 or 3. Is there a grading system like that, or is it all the same?
No, there is definitely a grading system because like I said, I customize the program for every passenger because your anxiety is not my anxiety and my anxiety is not third person's anxiety, neither neither in concept nor in the magnitude. And in any case, you two people cannot have the same mindset, so the anxieties are also very different. So what we do is we have four grades of anxiety passengers. So
Okay.
putting it in perspective: mild, then extreme, then severe, and then moderate. So not in that order. The order would be mild, moderate, severe, and extreme. So essentially, what they are is that a mild. Let me give you an example of a mild. A mild anxiety passenger is one who's feeling some sort of a tingling sensation, but he's not able to quantify his feelings.
Okay.
So he will fly like a normal passenger, but every time he looks at his co-passenger or somebody in front, he wonders, am I like him or am I a little different? Again, he's not able to tell, is he different or not different? So he flies like that. And this is typically the onset of flight anxiety. This is a typical case of onset of flight anxiety. So if mild is that mild, what is moderate? So moderate is a person who's made up his mind that flights are not very safe, aeroplane is not safe, pilots are not trustworthy. But if Dinesh or Suzanne are flying with me, I trust them. If they can bet their life on an aeroplane, I can also. So I will travel with them. So then what would be a severe one then? Severe person has said flights are definitely unsafe, and I'm a fool, and Dinesh is also a fool who's flying on the plane. But I have a requirement because I had a death in the family and I need to go for the funeral. So what he does is he pops in huge amount of medicines, some alcohol, and somehow makes that travel. So these are cases of severe and extreme, obviously understandable. Uh, you can drag him by his collar, he will not board a flight. So, so we have gradations like that. This helps me understand and build a program for the passenger because not one size fits all. And apart from that, from treatment perspective, also we have some gradation called level 1, level 2, level 3. That's essentially, are you going to get treated just by attending my program? That means by exposure to aviation related things. Or do you require a psychologist help? Or do you require a psychiatrist help because you have a medical condition? So if you have that, then you need to first go to them and then come to me. or if you have the requirement of a CBT from a psychologist or an NLP, or a lot of people do this mindfulness programs, and a lot of options are there nowadays,
Okay.
including some people see that as a solution, and then they come for supplementing it through these aviation awareness things. And so that those are the type of gradation we have in anxiety programs.
So you said in the beginning you can spot, you can tell how somebody has an anxiety. Because I said when I'm on the plane, I know I'm a little nervous. What is
Yeah.
getting less now? Every time I'm flying again, I started enjoying it again. I'm starting to enjoy the takeoff again. I'm starting to enjoy the cruise again. I'm just trying to see how beautiful the whole thing is. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that comes me on. And I look around and I don't see anybody doing like I don't know what that shows that they're nervous.
Okay. Now let me tell you a very interesting short story. I was flying on an Indigo flight once from here to Calcutta, from Bombay to Calcutta, and I had this suited booted man next to me, and he was holding a book, and that book was on page number 8, if I remember correctly. And this gentleman was sitting very tight, I would say. I would say to me, he straight away looked like the CEO of some company or something like that. So we we taxied out. We climbed up to about 10,000 feet, and the seatbelt lights were put off. And I still found this gentleman's page number 8, and I could not wait, because my business is to spot such people, and so I turned to him and I asked him. I said, "Are you by any chance flight anxious?" He snapped back towards my side and he said, "No." And he turned back, and I said, "Oh, I'm extremely sorry. I just asked that question." So anyway, I was very sure he is, because so after about a minute, this man snapped back again and he asked me another question. He said, "But why did you ask me that question?" I said, "So you have flight anxiety?" He said, "A big way." I said, "Oh." He said, "But can you tell me, how did you spot that I have flight anxiety?" I said, "The two things. One is that you were holding on a book and you were page number 8 right from the time we taxied out till the time uh, we were up to 10,000 feet. And you were doing one more thing. You were trying to wipe sweat from your face, your hand. And I think the cabin was pretty cold. So you were the only one doing that." And then, we struck a conversation, and I don't think he looked to in the front for the entire flight. We were talking, and he told me he was a very severe case of flight anxiety, and he was basically that was his way of getting not showing flight anxiety. So if you ask me, where are these passengers? They're all sitting next to you, some with earpods, some with books, some with saying prayers. Some will look like they meditate when they get some time. So all these passengers are all around you, but there are quite a few who you will never be able to spot, because they're already on medication.
Okay.
They
Okay.
When they board, they have already taken anxiety medicines. So they are actually they are all silenced. I call them silenced, because you ask them for food, they will say no. You ask them for water, they will say no. Then there are a lot of
Okay.
good passengers who go to the flight attendant and confidentially confide in them that they have flight anxiety. So whenever you come, they expect help when required. Then I know of passengers who tell their neighbor, their co-passenger, that they have flight anxiety, especially if it's from the different sex. Guess why? So, so the answer, yeah, the answer is that this man knows that he's acting that he doesn't have flight anxiety, but his anxiety can get triggered when he's on the flight. So,
Okay.
so typically, these sort of people will suddenly raise their hand and hold the next person next to them, and that should not be
Yeah.
misunderstood. For that reason, they
Yeah,
have to get the
I've
help.
done that. I've done that on that Kolkata flight. And to come back to turbulence, you said turbulence is the biggest issue. and I read up on turbulence, and turbulence is nothing. Usually, a pilot would even try to avoid it, but you cannot know if there's a air pocket, I think it's called, or there is some different temperature air, and if the plane is dropping, that doesn't mean anything. It's just it comes sudden. The thing is, when you're on the road, there are potholes and everything, and we're not blinking an eye. And if the same thing happens in the sky, the whole flight is smoother than any trip that you're taking in Mumbai roads, on Mumbai roads, but still you're reacting completely out of proportion to that. So you said turbulence. Turbulence is the biggest issue that
Yeah,
people
so
have with.
turbulence is the biggest issue because you see, everyone sees the plane as a hanging body. And yeah, its plane is actually hanging in the sky, right? So that's how you, and
The velocity, it's just
no, that's
okay. It's
how
hanging.
that's how we all look at it. But for for a
Okay.
person who's looking at it from a negative perspective, and he suddenly feels that turbulence means the pilot is losing control of the aeroplane. So he relates it to an impending crash. So when if you talk about turbulence, actually, how I put it is, most often the pilot does everything to avoid bad weather and what we call turbulence also. But uh, weather is something that you cannot completely avoid.
No.
So a pilot takes a decision as long as it's safe to fly. It cannot be a safety issue, and he will never continue the flight. And it could be a comfort issue. So what we, as rather as a passenger, what we experience as a turbulence as a major issue, pilot doesn't see it from that perspective. Now what happens is that there are certain types of turbulence that even the pilot cannot predict. They are known as the clear air turbulence. So
Okay.
they happen in good weather also. Rather, they you cannot spot them neither on the aircraft radar, nor you can spot them in your planning. So those sort of turbulence, they do create damage, and they cause injuries, and those are the ones which cause the traumatic experience to people. So turbulence is essentially, if you ask me, that's what I cover in the program also, is not a safety issue. It's more of a comfort issue. And,
Okay. Okay.
and the
So
example
if
is,
you
yeah, go ahead.
if you're flying in monsoon, yeah, I feel that is the time where it gets the most bumpy. But people still need to fly at that time, yeah. So how do you handle it? Like when I was on that flight, I really tried to stay calm and breathe. But if you're bumping around like this and you're sliding on your seat, you tend to feel a little nervous. I have to say.
Yes. So I
What can
think,
I do? What can I do at that moment? Yeah.
so all you need to do is to be seated, be belted, and trust the pilot, because how I put it, when you are worrying about turbulence, the pilot is still sipping his coffee.
Even in monsoon, even when the plane is
Absolutely,
oh God.
absolutely.
Okay,
Because
okay, okay.
what we usually worry about in turbulence, that is something that is a doable part of the flight. So typically the pilots, so how it happens is the pilots have got all the information required to tell between a dangerous weather en route and a doable weather. So if it's a
Okay.
dangerous weather, the pilots will circumvent that weather, or he will return back, or he will divert. Okay. So
Oh,
if the pilot has decided to go further because he's seen it on his weather radar, there's a radar on his cockpit which tells him what is doable and what is not doable. So if he's
okay,
passing through it, he's just a little cautious. That's all. He's
okay.
not thinking
So
of life and death.
do you think, one second, I just had this fun idea. Do you think it would help if the pilot would make an announcement? I'm sitting here and sipping my coffee, and I know there's a turbulence, but please, you all just chill. You know, I
Uh,
if there would be.
I wish the pilots were that informal, but uh, in fact, you are not related to turbulence. Many of the anxieties that come up is because the pilot doesn't announce the reason for why he did what he did. Like go around, diversion. So
Okay.
I wish pilots discussed, or not discussed, disseminated that information to the passengers as to why he did certain things, like a go around, why he is diverting, if there's a problem, why he switched off the engine, why he's descending down from 30,000 all the way to 10,000. Not necessary to make it immediately, not the first thing to do, but as and when he finds time. I wish that is done. That would bring down the anxiety cases by good about 50%, I would say.
At least, because I had this incident when we were landing in Jaipur, and I was like, oh yeah, and it was like literally before touchdown, where you can see the tarmac, and you're just expecting that last bump before you're on the ground, and suddenly he went boom all up again, and I was like, oh, what just happened? Later we got to know, much later we got to know this had to happen because there was a dog right where he was. It ran into the line of fire, so to speak, and he had to do this. And if I would have known that, I wouldn't have reacted the way I did. Like
Correct.
inside, I didn't scream or anything, but the pulse rate goes up and you start perspiring, and you're like, what just happened?
So actually, what happens is that each incident like this, you have one, and every person, this adds up to the mistrust. And in other words, if an announcement is made, it calms you down. So
Yes.
this has got a consequential effect also, in the sense that one such incident, you don't get an answer, the another one, you don't get an answer, and if you don't get answers for 5-6 such questions that happen with you, you tend to believe that the flights are unsafe, or rather pilots are not in control, or pilots did something wrong, or pilots do not know what they are doing. So that is of course one of the things is a good communication. It calms you down. In fact, the difference between an anxiety passenger and a normal passenger is that his brain system is not tuned to evaluating dangers correctly. So typically, how our brain works is, for all of us, a danger is posed to us, or what we perceive as a danger. The sensation is sent to the brain. There is a part of the brain called amygdala which decides whether the danger is real or uh, or um, irrational. And if it knows it is not real, it tells the brain to calm down and says, okay, this one is not a danger, move on to the next subject. And like this, we keep doing this every day. We call it the CEO secretary cycle, where a problem comes, the secretary tries to solve the problem, is not able to solve the problem, goes to the CEO, tells the CEO knows the solution, CEO says, don't worry, I know what to do, send this letter out. And he says, okay, tell me the next problem. So for a person who has a flight anxiety, their system doesn't have a rational working to say, okay, no, this is not a threat. So he doesn't calm down, and before anything else, another problem comes up, and that builds up again, and a negative loop like this builds, and that is where his threshold of anxiety is breached. And in fact, these, what you hear these days, flight risk, or what it's called, the destructive passengers or unruly passengers. Think of it. Does anyone ever board a flight to open the door or open the emergency window, or shout at a flight attendant, or to run towards the door? No. If you actually look at it, the mechanism, he's definitely not a unruly passenger. So what is he? He is a flight anxious passenger who was trying to fight the anxiety on board a flight, and somehow his anxiety threshold got breached, and now he has decided he does not know what he's doing, and he's doing what he's doing. So that's where I said it is very important for our aviation industry to take this flight anxiety very seriously, because every time we call a person unruly, and land at the nearest airport and hand him over to the police, you're not finding a solution. If you do a root cause analysis, you are not finding a solution. And the statistics say United States increased the fine for unruly passenger many folds.
They're very aggressive. I find them very aggressive. Whatever videos I see online where somebody flips out, probably to anxiety, as you said, the way they are handling it, nobody's trying to talk that person down. They start shouting, and when you shout at an anxiety passenger, I think it just escalates tremendously.
So because they are dealing with a law and order situation, so they've been told arrest him, fine him, put him in jail, and bar him from flying. But statistics has shown that despite all these measures, the anxiety number, the unruly passenger numbers are only going up exponentially. The reason is you're not doing a root cause analysis. You are not actually fighting the main cause of the problem. You are trying to address it. So there is a lot of education that is required between the aviation industry and the passengers that we need to exchange before we can actually uh, get this flight anxiety thing out. Like I think I was talking to you. Uh, uh, we say that people on board come drunk, right? And then they
Yeah,
create a ruckus on the flight.
yeah,
They do. And the irony is that just near the gate from where you're boarding, you have a bar.
yeah.
Guess why? Guess why? Why do you have to have a bar just next to the boarding gate? The reason is very simple. The aviation industry knows that if these people would not be allowed to drink and board the flight, you would have a ruckus being done on every other flight.
Oh, okay. So they don't take medication. They take like two,
They
three
take a
shots
drink.
to calm
Yeah.
themselves down.
So
Okay.
today you are asking where are these passengers next to you? Are they sitting next to you? Yeah, they're all there. Some of them have had their drink from the last stop at the next to the gate. Some of them have their own. A lot of things happen. A lot of things happen, and
Like
they're
if
all doing this to
somebody,
flight
like if
anxiety.
somebody like that sits next to me, can I do something for that person just by being calm myself and just talking them
Very
down or
much,
something, or
very,
just having a
very much.
conversation, just chat, just chat with me,
Very much. You can actually, empathy is the first step to addressing. Probably, if you empathize with a flight anxious passenger with this awareness that you have, or maybe with further reading, you have probably sorted out one unruly passenger case by understanding him and sorting out. So many passengers, in fact, what they do as a tacit solution to fight flight anxiety problems, they speak to their co-passenger from the time they board. They start speaking to you. They start strike a conversation, and then yeah. So you sometimes may get agitated, but he's doing it with purpose. He's doing with a purpose. As much as many will keep quiet and as I said, read, show that they are reading book or listening to music. And so there are many mechanisms that people use to get over this anxiety when they are doing this flight, but eventually they land up as flight anxious cases, because one traumatic experience is all that you require to
Yeah.
actually get into the other side of the fence.
You have ever a kid coming, like parents bring a child that has anxiety?
Oh yes,
Is that
I've had
really?
a I've had a case of uh, a doctor's child getting
Okay.
yeah, the child, in fact, it was such a strange thing for me to. So I one good thing or a bad thing, you say. I have these people coming, and when they narrate their stories, I have huge amount of very unique experiences that they narrate. So this child that you are talking about, or rather I am talking about, is a child who had gone on a vacation to Switzerland, and all of a sudden on return flight this child refused to enter the airport.
Oh,
Yeah, so he got a attack and he refused to enter the airport. And they, first of all, they lost the ticket. They could not fly that thing. Then they tried to convince the child somehow, and they took a day to convince the child that we can fly back. The child took the flight back to India, and that's the last time that child has flown.
what happened?
What happened? He got a panic
Yeah.
attack. So there are a lot of these cases where some other panic, some other traumatic experience, the child starts connecting with aviation flight. So that's how our mind is very complex. You don't know when it triggers what sort of thoughts. So they took him to a psychologist, and of course the mother was a doctor. uh, So they took him to psychology, and psychologist said that some other traumatic experience has surfaced in front of him, and he's decided not to fly. And so
Okay.
this kid, so I get very strange cases. So I thought I had written down a few cases, and let me just take you to synopsis of maybe okay. I thought, let me this I must I have to read the title, so I know which case I'm talking about. So there is a gentleman who had ear infection, and he did not know that. He boarded a flight, and all of a sudden, this gentleman decided to leave the flight, and he ran out of the flight, and he came back. He tried to take another flight, and he could not take that flight. This time, he did not even go into the airport building. So he headed for a doctor, because the first everyone feels that the right place to go is to a doctor. So he headed to a
Yeah.
doctor, and doctor figured out that this gentleman uh, had a ear infection, because of which the moment he was entering the aeroplane, he was getting dizzy. Now you see, it's a one time thing. He got ideally, when the ear infection, board the flight subsequently, but now a fear has set in, and this gentleman would not board a flight. So you see how a trivial ear infection caused dizziness, and the man started believing that he has got a problem, and he stopped boarding a flight.
Okay, so that would be the typical case of anticipating the future by past experiences.
Correct. You put a stamp. You already put a stamp on your this thing, that I have a problem, and this problem is because he, unless until the doctor told him that he's got a ear infection, and these all learned people, by the way. If I go into the background, he is the CEO of a company. This gentleman I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So that was one. Then another example I wanted to give you of a very learned person who's got a fear of flying, a doctor who's a super specialist in oncology, and he's got fear. So what I'm coming to is that a doctor is well read on science, physics, maths, and whatnot, but still, when it comes to irrational fears like flight anxiety, uh,
Hmm.
you can have anyone having a mistrust on aviation,
How
because
long do you have a treatment? Like if you have, let's say, a moderate case, how long do you treat people? Is this a couple of sessions, or how do you go about it? Like you said, the first step is a phone call. Yeah. And then
so
somebody after the phone call, they will come to you, and then what are the next steps?
so it's always just one session. Now
Oh.
the psychology what works in this is, I explain to him what is real in a flight, take away all his myths. In fact, reboot his entire hard disk with facts now over a period of 7 hours. Then, without waiting, we do one flight. We call it the proving flight. That is without waiting, because we don't want him to give a chance to think now. So he does that flight. We do another proving flight, and this session with two flights, when he lands back at home and looks back, he says, I've done it all. You're getting the. So this is typically like, I'll give you an example. Some people, how do they learn swimming or diving from a board? If they were to be told, please go and dive, they would not. They're pushed from the diving board, they go down. And the moment he is able to do one jump, what does he say? Oh, lovely. Let me go for another jump, and a third one, and a fourth one, and lifelong he jumps. So this is how you restart a person into flying. This is called, also called, the Germans, like, they call it blitzkrieg. I call it the shock effect. Okay. The I call it the shock effect, because without giving him any time, I took him on did the session. He understood everything. We went on a flight, came back, and when he did two flights, I don't have to ask him. He himself says, Dinesh, I can't believe I did two flights, and that too in one day. And so I'm all set. I said, yeah, congratulations, you all done. You
So
are ready
that's
for the flight.
so that's that
And
term when
of
you
course,
fall off the horse. When you fall off the horse, you immediately have to go on it again.
yes. So only good thing about this the program is, Subsequently, whenever he has got any doubts or he or she has got any doubts, they always consult me. But they say, okay, it's something like this happened in Ethiopia or something. What do you have to say? So you calm them down, and then so the whole idea of the for a very anxious passenger, we call him fear of flying cases. So the lesser version is flight anxiety, and the higher version is fear of flying. So for fear of flying, it is important that the man should be able to travel from A to B.
Yeah. Okay.
With a little distress, still okay, because he's able to meet the ends, like his anxieties. The flight anxiety's biggest problem is that it erodes your wealth, it erodes your health and your well-being, and that's all that you can. These are the god gifted things a person has. Like, he can make wealth, he can have wellness, as well as he can have a good health. All three are gone with flight anxiety. You cannot
Okay.
travel
You
to
cannot
vacation.
business. Yeah. There's so many
You cannot
things that
attend
would
a
be
you
restricted.
cannot attend
Yeah.
a funeral. You cannot go to your daughter's place in US because you cannot fly. You cannot do a business because that requires you to travel. So
Mm.
all these things put together erode whatever little a man can amass in his lifetime. And therefore, most of the people, for them, it's very important that they should be able to go from A to B. So like I say, for a very very serious case, if he's able to go from A to B, it's success for me. And for the not so serious case, if he's able to go from A to B and still enjoy the journey,
Yeah.
it is a grand success for me. So I have a
Amazing.
lot of passengers who are happy flyers turned anxious flyers turned happy flyers.
That's
I have
amazing.
I have a lot of passengers who are happy flyer turned dreaded flyers, dreadful flyers, or rather fear of flying passengers who never flew, to started flying. So
Wow.
that also is a small step, but a big leap, I would say. For
So
think
if
of it
somebody
from that
wants to get
gentleman's perspective.
if somebody wants to get in touch with you, they are able to connect with you on cockpitvista.com, if I got that right.
That's right. Cockpitvista.com. So that
Right.
gives
Yeah.
the address and all these places. So now we are in Bangalore, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. You were in Hawaii before. Yeah. Is that right?
We were in Hawaii. We've shifted from Bombay to Bangalore. But
What a pity. Otherwise, I would have taken my camera and come and just shot the whole thing as a follow-up video. Bangalore
you're
is a
always
little
welcome. You're always welcome.
further away. Thank you so much for this amazing chat. We had a couple of comments where people were saying this is a super interesting topic. Very well done. Hats off, Dinesh sir. Jai Hind, Dinesh sir. So all these kinds of compliments and comments have come that you might have not been able to see. And I want to say thank you so much. Any closing remark you want to say? Otherwise, I think this is beautifully wrapped up.
No, let me say a big thank you to you, because this for me, this is a platform to create awareness about this subject, and that's also a part of my mission. So thank you very much for listening me out, and all the best for your sessions. I have seen a few of them that you have done before, and best wishes for more such, bringing out more of such topics, so that we create the right amount of awareness in the world going forward, for especially for the next gen.
Yeah, positive vibes are very important these days because Sadhguru says there is like a mental pandemic happening where people are getting more and more anxiety, they're getting more and more worried, and you are one of the stalwarts who's fighting against this just by information. So thank you for giving your time. Thank you on a Sunday afternoon. You have given nearly over 1 hour of time of your time just to talk about this topic. And I hope my viewers enjoyed this and got so much out of it like I did. I learned a lot of things. I feel much more relaxed now. And talking to you was a pleasure. Thank you so much, Dinesh.
My pleasure too. My pleasure too. An absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.
So nice to
Okay.
know.
So that was the talk today with Susanne Talks To. Today it was with Dinesh Nair, who is all the way in Bangalore, and we were talking about flight anxiety. Please stay tuned next Sunday again at 4:30, probably. Okay, namaskar. Goodbye.